Each in their own way, the presenters today reckon with the give and take between humans and their material realities. We change the material objects that surround us, and those objects that surround us change us. And change involves both limitation and potential. With regard to limitation, in the first volume for the Journal of Material Culture, the editors recognize that material culture constrains who we can become. Humans cannot transcend their surrounding material culture more than it will allow. For example, there cannot be more mouths to feed than there is food to make. Otherwise, supply and demand will create a shrinking population. Thus, material observations like this helps to sober certain far-fetched ideas. One idea being, for example, from my own field, the number of Christians in Jerusalem in the first century. The book of Acts narrates there being roughly 10,000 Christians in that city. However, a recent study by Samuel Roca shows that the size of local buildings and the number of residencies there allows for about a total population of 60 to 70,000. So it becomes inconceivable to imagine there being suddenly 10,000 Christians there on top of this small city relatively. But material context also offers potential. Materialism and New Testament scholar Laura Sala Nasrallah observes that humans and things are entangled so that humans bodily evolve in relation to things. This makes humans and things co-participants in matter and creation. Therefore, to study the material context surrounding people is to study the relationship in which they participated and they grew. Sonia Hazard's presentation examines this very dynamic. She reminds us that religion is a phenomenon of this material world, however you want to define that it partakes in material, that it interprets material, that some would say that it is born of material. She comes alongside Terrell Givens and Richard Bushman in stating that even Mormons, believe it or not, operate in a material world in which not only could Joseph Smith hold real tablets, but in fact, the printing press cultures around him gave him ample opportunity to hold such tablets. And if we allow ourselves to surrender to this idea that he might have held real tablets, then the door is open to asking questions about the give and take relationship between him and the material objects that he had a relationship to. How did his material world influence and inspire him, and how did he inspire and influence his material world? Furthermore, this realignment of our senses helps us to view religion itself as material culture. And so Hazard rightly ponders why so many religion scholars resist the give and take of our own material objects, that is, the religions we're studying. For his part, Paul Gouchard follows the give and take relationship in two historical processes of editing and reading. The material form of the printed Bible gave potential to Orson Pratt's vision of a new format for the Book of Mormon. Then in turn, Pratt's printed influence impacted many people's geographic interpretations of the Book of Mormon. Oppositely, editorial expectation of the Bible's material form limited Kate Itu's aspirations for a magazine Bible. They wouldn't let her do it. But when her aspirations were finally realized, in just the first month, she had combined the material worlds of the New Testament with the minutiae of teenage life for 40,000 young women in just 1 month. I wonder how many adults to this day, when they put on makeup, they, for some reason, remember certain biblical passages. Because, as Gouchard teaches us, whatever exists on the material page with Scripture partakes in a give and take with those Scriptures. Our influences, one influences our engagement of the other. The question I have for Gouchard happens to be the locus of Jeffrey Syker's paper. What happens when the page is removed from the equation? What happens when digitalization disembodies Scripture from the material world to some degree? It's still there because you have a device, but it's also kind of not there. What relationships do we lose? Syker notes that we lose the relationship inherent in biblical anatomy. That is, how all the various portions of Scripture relate to one another, how they relate to each other within books, how those books relate, how the canons relate. Biblical anatomy changes biblical interpretation. Again, an example from my field of study. Many early Eastern New Testaments placed the general epistles, 1st and 2nd Peter, and Jude, and so forth, right after the book of Acts. And then Paul came later. And then at some point in Western manuscript tradition, it flips. Well, let's not be surprised then when the Protestants' primary lens for understanding Jesus is Paul. Why? Because in their canonical anatomy, the first theological discourses were Paul's letters. Now we're reading it differently. If I could ask Syker to expand his analysis in a second paper, I would want to hear whether he thinks that due to digitalization, we also are losing the power of the Bible as icon. During the Reformation, the object of the printed Bible exuded power and identity. Even though they might not have been able to read it, Reformationists loved to carry it and display it in their homes because it showed a relational power. The Bible is my own. Or another example, Marianne Beavis published a study on the Bible as a prop in horror films. In older horror films, Scripture appears as an effectual weapon against power, evil power. But in later films, more and more, Scriptures are presented by characters just for evil to laugh at it and probably destroy it. Foolish believer, your Scripture has no power anymore. Correlation cannot prove causation, but I cannot help but wonder if losing our materiality of the Bible is also causing us to lose a sense of its power as icon, even in the material world of fiction. And perhaps what the combination of all three presentations teaches us is that we're not only witnessing the material change of this object deemed Scripture, we are witnessing the change in how that object relates to and influences us in return.